The scream didn't sound human. It tore through the air before I even had time to turn, and by the time I did, she was already charging toward my daughter. There was no warning, no hesitation, just pure rage written across her face as something had finally snapped. "You think you can steal from my family?" she shouted, her voice shaking with something far beyond anger. And then it happened. Her hand struck so hard it echoed. My daughter stumbled, eyes wide in shock, her body trying to recover from something it didn't understand. But she didn't get the chance. One step back turned into a fall, and then silence. She hit the ground, unmoving. For a second, everything froze. And in that terrifying stillness, one question took over my mind. How did this get so out of control? If that moment caught you off guard, you're not alone. And trust me, it only gets worse from here. Welcome back to my channel, where stories like this unfold in ways you wouldn't believe unless you heard every detail yourself. What started as a simple neighborhood rivalry turned into something far darker, something no parent ever expects to face. Stay with me, because once you see how everything connects, you'll understand just how quickly things can spiral beyond control. Before everything fell apart, life in our neighborhood had a rhythm to it. Predictable, almost comforting. My daughter had always been the kind of kid who put her whole heart into everything she did, especially swimming. Early mornings, sore muscles, quiet determination, she never complained. She just kept pushing, chasing a version of herself she knew she could become. That's what made her different. Not just talent, but discipline. And right beside her for most of those years was Sandra, Karen's daughter. They trained together, laughed together, and for a long time, they genuinely lifted each other up. There was competition, sure, but it felt healthy, the kind that makes both people better. Then there was Karen. If you've ever met someone who needs control like oxygen, you'll understand. She treated the neighborhood like her personal kingdom, always watching, always correcting, always inserting herself where she didn't belong. Rules weren't just rules to her, they were weapons. And somehow, everything always circled back to her daughter being the best, the brightest, the one who had to win. At first, it seemed harmless, just an overbearing parent with too much time and too much pride. But looking back, the signs were always there, quietly building beneath the surface. As the competition drew closer, the routine intensified in ways that felt both exciting and quietly exhausting. My daughter pushed herself harder than ever, waking before sunrise, repeating laps until her arms trembled, refining every movement with a focus that didn't need validation from anyone. She wasn't chasing applause. She just wanted to know she had given everything. Sandra was right there beside her most days, matching that effort. But something had started to shift. Conversations grew shorter, smiles a little more forced, as if an invisible line had been drawn between them. Karen, on the other hand, made that line impossible to ignore. She spoke about the competition like the outcome was already decided, telling anyone who would listen that Sandra was destined to win, that years of preparation had made it inevitable. There was no room in her version of reality for second place, let alone defeat. At first, it came off as confidence, maybe even pride. But over time, it started to feel heavier, like pressure that didn't belong to the kids at all. By the time competition day arrived, the air around us felt different. The pool was loud, crowded, full of energy. But underneath it all was something tighter, something waiting. You could feel expectations hanging there, just before everything would be tested. When the race began, everything else seemed to disappear. The noise, the crowd, even the tension that had been building for weeks. It all faded into the background as they cut through the water. For a moment, it was just rhythm and focus, and then, just like that, it was over. My daughter touched the wall first. There was a split second of silence before the realization hit, and her face lit up in a way I'll never forget. Pure joy, the kind that comes from knowing every early morning and every sacrifice actually meant something. Sandra finished right behind her, close enough to show how hard she had fought, but not enough to change the outcome. The announcer confirmed it. First place to my daughter. Applause broke out, people cheering, cameras lifting. A moment that should have belonged entirely to the kids. But it didn't stay that way for long. Because across the stands, Karen wasn't clapping. Her expression shifted almost instantly, like something inside her refused to accept what had just happened. What should have been pride turned into something darker, sharper. And as people began to notice, that quiet tension turned into something far more uncomfortable. It didn't take long for the celebration to turn into something else entirely. By the next morning, the joy from the competition already felt like it belonged to another world. Karen wasted no time turning her frustration into something far more destructive. First, it was Whisper's small comments to other parents, suggesting the results weren't fair, hinting that something about the scoring had been manipulated. Then those whispers grew into full accusations. She didn't just question the win, she attacked it, as if repeating the lie enough times would make it real. What hurt most wasn't even the accusations, it was what came next. Sandra stopped talking to my daughter. At first, we thought it was just confusion, maybe pressure from her mother. But then it became consistent. Cold silence in the hallways, avoidance at practice, distance where there used to be laughter. Watching two kids who once shared everything become strangers was worse than any argument Karen could have started directly. Then came the driveway moment. I still remember stepping outside and hearing her voice before I even saw her. She was already mid-rant, gathering an audience like she always did, turning private bitterness into public performance. Every sentence was louder than the last, every claim more exaggerated, until it wasn't about swimming anymore. It was about control, about rewriting reality so she didn't have to accept loss. And the worst part? It didn't stop there. Every day after that felt like a new escalation, like she was testing how far she could push before something finally broke. A few days later, I decided I couldn't let this drag on any further. I needed answers, not rumors, not hallway silence, not this slow destruction of two kids who had nothing to do with adult pride. So I walked with my daughter straight to Karen's house, hoping at least one reasonable conversation could reset everything. The air felt strangely calm that afternoon, almost deceptive, like the neighborhood itself didn't want to admit what had been happening. When we arrived, it wasn't Karen who answered. It was Ken, her husband. He looked tired in a way that suggested he had been surviving the storm for years. Still, he greeted us politely and motioned for us to sit on the porch. No tension, no shouting, just a brief moment of unexpected calm. And then, something even more surprising happened. The girls saw each other. For the first time in days, they actually smiled, hesitantly at first, then naturally, like no distance had ever existed between them. It was a small thing, but it felt huge. Even Ken seemed relieved, as if normality had briefly returned. For a moment, I almost believed maybe this could still be fixed without anything breaking completely. The calm didn't last. It never really had a chance to. The sound of tires screeching into the driveway cut through everything, like a warning no one had time to understand. Before anyone could even react, Karen was already out of the car. Her presence alone changed the entire atmosphere, like the air had been drained out of the moment we were just trying to hold on to. She didn't hesitate. She didn't ask questions. Her eyes locked onto my daughter with a kind of focus that made my stomach drop instantly. "So this is where you come to celebrate what you stole," she snapped, her voice shaking with rage. I stood up immediately, trying to step between them, but it all escalated too fast. 1 second, she was shouting. Next, she moved. The slap echoed louder than anything I've ever heard in my life. My daughter stumbled back, completely stunned, her hand rising to her face in disbelief. But Karen wasn't done. She shoved her again, harder this time. There was no time to catch her balance, no time to react. My daughter fell, hitting the ground with a force that made everything in my head go silent for half a second. Then she didn't move. Everything after that blurred. I was shouting her name, dropping to my knees, trying to wake her up while panic took over every part of me. Someone was screaming. Someone was calling for help. And somewhere in the distance, I realized this had crossed a line that could never be undone. Sirens arrived within minutes, but it felt like an eternity. The sound grew louder, cutting through the chaos like a lifeline. Neighbors were already gathering at the edge of the driveway, some in shock, others speaking at once, trying to explain what they had just witnessed. Their voices overlapped. She slapped her. She pushed her. The girl fell hard, each detail painting a picture no one should ever have to describe. The ambulance stopped abruptly, and paramedics rushed out immediately, moving straight toward my daughter without hesitation. I stayed right beside them as they checked her pulse and carefully assessed her condition. Every second felt stretched, fragile, uncertain. Then came the police, stepping in with a calm authority that contrasted sharply with the chaos moments before. Karen was still yelling, still trying to justify what she had done, but her words were drowning under the reality forming around her. When the officers approached, she resisted, shouting over everyone until they finally restrained her. The moment the cuffs clicked, something in the air shifted. Not peace exactly, but the beginning of consequences finally catching up. At the hospital, everything felt unreal at first. My daughter was finally stable, but still shaken and confused about what had happened. The doctor confirmed a concussion, but assured us she would recover fully with time and rest. Relief should have been the only feeling, but the reality of everything that led here was heavier than anything else. Ken arrived shortly after, looking completely broken as he tried to process what his wife had done. Within 48 hours, the situation escalated legally in ways none of us expected. Charges were filed quickly, including assault, child endangerment, and resisting arrest. The court proceedings were brief, and the evidence left no room for denial. Karen was sentenced to jail time, along with heavy fines and mandatory counseling. Her reputation collapsed completely as she lost custody, status, and control over everything she once dominated. The neighborhood finally felt peace again, as if a weight had been lifted after years of tension. And for the first time, I could see my daughter smile without fear returning to her eyes. Justice had finally caught up, and even though nothing could undo the damage, at least it was over. Balance was restored at last. What happened in the end still feels unreal when I think about it, but maybe that's what makes it so hard to forget. One moment, everything was normal, and the next, a single act of rage changed multiple lives forever. My daughter is healing now, slowly returning to the bright, confident girl she was before all of this started. But some scars don't disappear easily, even when justice is served. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that silence in the face of control only lets things grow worse. So I want to ask you this. Do you think she deserved what happened in the end? If you made it this far, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this.